Hi there, my name is Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today I've got another layer cake project for you. Now you don't have to have a layer cake. You can use any size of square fabric that you want to use. Large, small, doesn't matter. I'm going to show you a super easy way to make stars with just one cut. I pulled down a few layer cakes from my stash, and as I'm looking through them, I have this sense and sensibility. Well, I'm not going to use that for this project. I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet, but I just love it, so I'm going to have to save it for something special. I'm looking at these two layer cakes and then the Island Batiks underneath. I don't feel like there are enough lights. So I want to make one baby quilt with dark stars and light background and one baby quilt with the opposite. So I looked at this ocean blue escape coastal fabric and I thought about using that. I thought that might work out well. This purple floral had some nice lights and darks, but not quite enough lights. I finally decided on this particular layer cake because it had 26 light, 16 dark, and 16 background is going to make a nice 4x4 baby quilt size. So I'm going to pair 16 darks with 16 lights, and then I'm going to try and figure out a way to use the extra lights and get them moved on out. The first thing I did was sort out these lights and darks, and then I started pairing up a light and a dark. Not necessarily that they would go together, just so they are spaced out. Now I've got 16 lights and 16 darks ready to go, and 10 extra lights. The cutting for this is so easy, just one cut, and you can customize this cut however you want your star to look. I am choosing to cut at a 3-inch mark on the top side and then a 2-inch mark from the bottom. I'm lining up these squares with lines on my cutting mat. I'm counting over 3 inches from the right, and I'm counting up 2 inches from the bottom, and I'm going to make a diagonal cut. Once I get that cut, I'm stacking them over to my right-hand side, and I'm going to cut 4 more, and I'm going to keep cutting these and keep stacking them up. Now, if you want to use solids, stripes, yardage, whatever you have, anything is going to work with this. Any square you have is going to work, and like I said, that angle that you're cutting, you can customize that to however you want it to end up. Once all your angles are cut, you will take the top wedge, just the one piece on the top, and move that to the bottom. That way we're going to be stitching a dark background to a light wedge and a light background to a dark wedge. Because there's no seam allowance built into this 10-inch square, we are going to lose a little bit. Here is a look at how that will look when it's pressed open. You can see that the edge of the wedge is not going to reach all the way to the edge of our previous 10-inch square. That's because we're losing a 1/4 inch on each piece. Once I pressed all those seams flat, it's time to trim. And what I'm doing is using my wedge shape for a guide. I'm lining up the left and the bottom part of the ruler with 9.5 inches, lining up with that wedge. Once that's lined up, I can trim the right-hand side and the top side. Then I will flip the unit around and trim the other two sides. Now it's time to lay out my blocks and get ready to sew them together. So while I was trimming them, I separated them out into lights and darks. So I'm putting them around in a 4-patch, and I'm making sure my light background is going to the outer corners and my dark fabric is going to the inside. And next I lay the dark blocks the same way. I've got these right next to my sewing machine, so I am going to take the top 2 blocks and stitch those together first, and I am chain piecing here. Once the top 2 are all joined, I'm going to just keep on with the bottom 2. After separating the chain, I put all the pieces back where I got them, and now I can start joining the top 2 blocks together with the bottom 2 blocks. Using large blocks like this makes it super easy. I go ahead and start stitching my seam just to hold it in place. Then I can use my fingers to nest the seam and just hold that until that seam in the middle gets to the needle. If you feel more comfortable, you can use a couple of pins or use some clips to hold that seam in place. Once these are finished, I'm going to have 16 extra large blocks, 4 with the dark background and 4 with the light background for 2 separate baby quilts. Now it's simply a matter of putting the 4 blocks together in 2s and then putting the 2s together to complete the main part of these baby quilts. It's hard to believe these 2 separate quilts came from the same layer cake. If this is all you want to do, that is great. This would be a great place to just stop and finish your quilt. But I did have 10 extra layer cakes in that lighter shade, and I wanted to use them up, so I'm going to make a little bit of a border with them. I stacked the layer cakes up and I cut them into 2.5-inch strips. Well, I also have quite a few 2.5-inch by width of fabric strips in white shades, and I'm going to use those to build up some little squares to make a border. The first thing I am going to do is stitch every single one of my little layer cake strips right sides together with a white strip. I chain pieced until my entire stack was done. Next, I separated my chain and then I pressed all these units open. Now I'm going to cut these strips the opposite way into 2.5 inch widths approximately. I am not really worried if they're 1/4 of an inch off or a 1/2 inch off. It's okay for what I'm going to be doing. I am staggering these little units on my cutting mat, and that way I'm going to be able to make the cuts to a whole bunch of them all at once with a nice long ruler. First, I trim off the right-hand side, even with my 10-inch strips. Then I trimmed off the left-hand side, even with my 10-inch strips. Now I can cut the strips at 2.5 inch increments. Now I'm going to be stitching these units into one long border. To start with, I'm going to make a 4-patch. So I'm making sure my layer cake fabric is opposite from the neutral. And I'm going to nest that seam and stitch these 2 little units together to make a 4-patch. I chain pieced until I had turned all those units into 4 patches. With that done, I took 2 4 patches and stitched them together. Next, I took 2 8 patches and stitched them together. Once that was done, I had 16 patches. And now that these patches are so long, I can flip the tail end of my unit around to join the next 16 patch. The cool thing about doing it this way is once I'm done, I'm done. My border length will be all finished. I did go ahead and take this to the iron and press this strip flat. The next thing I did was try and measure this approximately. I wanted to know how much border length I actually had and would it go around my 2 little baby quilts. Well, I did a little math and I came up with approximately how many inches long this strip was, which was 312 inches. And I didn't think that was going to be long enough to go around both of these baby quilts. So I started with the dark one first because I thought, well, I'll go all the way around this one. And that'll be a nice contrast going all the way around with the dark background. One thing you'll notice, I did not measure this border. I just started sewing, and when I got to the end of a side, I cut off the border, I flipped it 45 degrees and started on side 2. When I get all the way around this quilt and have the border complete, I will press those seams flat and then I will trim off my excess at that time. I decided for the light background baby quilt, I would use this border on 2 opposite sides. And I had just a little bit of this border left. I'm going to put that into my scrap bin and hopefully find a use for it very soon. Here are these 2 cute finished quilts. I really love the way these turned out. I might try this technique again sometime and maybe make it just a little bigger. There's also a way to make a secondary star pattern by making 2 cuts on the layer cake instead of just the 1. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.